U.S. military active and reserve duty members, how are you feeling? What's the consensus between you and your colleagues about Trump? Story 1 active. I don't agree with any of this. I didn't vote for him, but I've never gotten to choose my bosses anyway. Politics aside, completely forgetting our allies' help after 9/11 and the lives they lost is absolutely unforgivable. They died for our war on terrorism. I'm glad the majority of the World War II veterans are gone because I would never want them to see what this country is doing and how their sacrifices and PTSD meant nothing to a draft dodger, a Nazi, and a bootlicking alcoholic. Edit to add thank you to everyone for your support. I have seen some questions on my reference of alcoholic. I'm talking about multiple people, not just one. But if your response assumes I'm only talking about one person and you proceed to take issue with that part of a description and not the Nazi part, then you might need to do some inward reflection. Story 2 currently active duty. Concern for mine and my fellows in arms. I would never wish harm on my neighbors from the north or my compadres from the south. I do not share the same sentiment with a lot of the people I work with. It disgusts me that my compatriots are willingly supporting the shenanigans afoot in D.C. I am sincerely worried about my future. I am supposed to retire in 2027, but I am worried that may not happen. I will not betray my country, but I may betray certain orders should push come to shove. There are lines I will not cross. Edit to add well, this is a first for me. My phone won't shut up. I love that there are many people including past and present military that support my thoughts, and I sincerely hope that we can all use this experience to influence our people currently in power to right the boat before it sinks. We have suffered damages as a nation, but we can and will repair it. We might be a young nation in the grand scheme of things, but we didn't get to be the nation we are without a lot of work from our ancestors. I will fight to preserve the foundations we were founded upon come or high water. Once again, thank you all for your sincere thoughts. I am having a hard time keeping up with all the posts. My post exploded like our diplomatic relations. Story 3 I was active duty during his first term. I would participate in daily intelligence briefs by creating my own slides dedicated to my warfare area undersea to present to our chain of command on board a guided missile destroyer. I was also privy to a lot of intelligence on a broader scope. It has been crystal clear that Russia is an adversary since the first brief I saw. I am in shock that no Republican politician is openly calling out how much of a threat Trump is considering the fact they must have security clearances. I know people say that the military is generally conservative, but the people I worked with and those who held positions which required a higher level of intelligence typically leaned left. My circle of extremely close friends talk a lot about this administration and how much it feels like a punch in the gut. We spent years trying to keep Russia at bay and suddenly we are BFFs. We have literally spent trillions arming our military in a fight against Russia with little results to show for it. We give Ukraine some scraps of our yearly military budget and they manage to sink multiple ships and even a submarine. TLDR I hate it here and worry about our national security. Story 4 active duty, 12 years in, I'm straight up not having a good time, don't see why we're poking and prodding our allies, amongst other concerns. I'm currently working with said allies in Germany, and am very concerned about my future in my current role. Story 5 I know it isn't quite what was asked, but as an active Canadian service member, I speak from first-hand account of the professionalism and dedication to duty I've seen among my American military brothers and sisters over my 10 years of service. While these are uneasy times, I am confident that should the worst come to pass, I can count on you folks as we always have to do the right thing. We know who the bad guys are, and it isn't each other. Edit I wasn't expecting over 6K upvotes to this. Off social media, Canada still loves you as a bigger brother. A lot of us just see this as you going through a rowdy drunk phase. When we boo your current administration, not you. I see firsthand every year when you send firefighters to help us with wildfires up in BC and Alberta, as well as being our closest economic and military allies. Intelligence and information shared through the Five Eyes has saved thousands of innocent lives over the last 25 years. That doesn't just disappear over a couple of months. We'll power through this. You may not ever be what you once were afterwards, but we'll still have your back. Story 6 I was active for 25 years Clinton to Biden, and I really don't think people understand how apolitical we really are. The vast majority of us look at conflicts the same way firefighters look at a fire. We didn't choose the fire to be there. The people you voted for did, so here we are to put it out. That said, we really are the best microcosm of America you'll find. Pick any town in America, and you'll find a veteran. We're not sheep on the scale we get imagined to be, and we take oaths to the Constitution, are trained in laws of armed conflict, rules of engagement like if we hosed a protester down in a chemical like the police do that's called a war crime, we'd go to jail, and we know we would because the guy next to us would get a medal for turning us in. Totally different culture. Currently, I think you'll find a lot of people researching what constitutes a legal order and are worried about their benefits. Mexican cartels being designated as terrorist groups might turn into something military, but I don't see country invading country. Story 7 A few hardcore Trumpers on my unit and I can't stand working with them. The amount of bullshit they spew is ridiculous. I tried to do some research to battle their stupidity, but it's literally like Bannon says, they flood the zone with and it's impossible to correct before they move on to the next bullshit. Just waiting for it to fully hit the fan. Story 8 active here. Both my dad and grandpa fought for decades against the dictatorship in the country they came from. Watching Americans throw away all of their freedoms and future in the trash just to make their neighbor's life more miserable is disappointing. Ultimately, when a dictator takes power, they end up purging impersonating even members of their own party and clique in order to consolidate power entirely. These people are chiefly animated by hate, jealousy, and entitlement, and they believe they will be part of the winning in-group and benefit from the suffering of their fellow citizens. Story 9. I'm out now, but I was in when Trump first got elected. The military supports Trump more than the general population. The barracks were bumping when it started to look like he was going to win it in 2016, and the next day at work a bunch of us tuned into the concession speech from Hillary. The military does have a full range of the political spectrum. I've known some classic Democrats and some full-on socialists. Story 10. I have a subordinate who's a die-hard Trump supporter and posts bullshit fringe on social media. In what you would call a moderate liberal, we keep it professional at work, but anytime he tries to talk about politics or some other unfounded Trump bullshit, I just shut it down. Story 11. I retired last summer after 20 years. I was disgusted by the amount of mindless support amongst my peers. I swore to defend and uphold the Constitution, not to declare loyalty to a king. I don't know what these other guys saw in him or what they thought their service meant, but am now questioning what I spent the last 20 years defending because it sure as wasn't this. Story 12. Got out in 2020, was stationed in the rural South the whole time I was in. It seemed about 40 Trump supporters, 30 blue and 30 didn't care. The 40 were very open about it while the rest of us would just shoot each other looks while they would ramble. No consequences because nobody would say anything while they rambled. He lost a lot of support when he had a falling out with Mattis. People really liked him and it was a push-come-to-shove moment. Trump support has probably rebounded from that by now. What I'm trying to say is that the military supports Trump narrative is BS. It's just as split as everywhere else. Seems everyone who controls the TVs picks Fox News though. Story 13. At 10 years in, some active, now reserve. I have avoided discussing it directly at drill. The only consensus that was reached is that this is crazy. It'll be getting out as soon as possible. Story 14. Mixed opinions of my colleagues. Kind of depends on what room I'm in, however. I've piped up asking what their take on some of the with Russia getting some free passes lately from our SecDef, and they mostly haven't heard about it cause Fox News is the only reliable source, and when they check and see, they get kind of confused. I want to get a bunch of Russian hats, the type, and hand them out for any random holiday, and just say they're the new norm. Story 15. Was listening to a vet at lunch today talk about the VA layoffs. He doesn't strike me as especially enamored with Trump, but he was also completely ambivalent to the layoffs, because the VA is already so poorly run that you'd hardly be able to tell there was any deterioration in services, as he put it. Story 16. Active. I hate what is going on and I am severely disappointed in my fellow service members and veterans that fully support him. He is destroying our relationship between our allies, both government and their citizens, and making a mockery of our Constitution. I'm ashamed to be overseas right now. My biggest worry is what will happen to my family if I am ever given an unlawful order that I refuse to follow. Story 17. Been active through the entire Obama admin, literally days before he was inaugurated, through to now. In short, there is no consensus between my colleagues and me about Trump. To expand a little, there is more expressed unhappiness, uncertainty, and concern from people who I assume lean conservative, but are not die-hard supporters. The die-hard supporters, maliciously cruel people, and just willfully ignorant people, support him still, or at least don't care what else is going on so long as a Democrat isn't in charge. My hot take is that culture war and deep state rhetoric have been extremely effective in convincing a large number of people that any outcome is preferable to woke leftist authoritarianism, a threat I maintain is fully imagined. Either way, the guys who were hand-wringing over how we'd be getting our asses handed to us by Russia and China just 4 years ago, because of how tough Russia's commercial was compared to our commercial about a soldier with gay moms, are now fully supportive of a man who, in simple terms, wants to align himself with those powers. I watched their opposition to support for Ukraine morph from I don't like how they also use deceptive propaganda. Ukraine is very corrupt. We shouldn't give them money to supporting a man who says Russia was in the right to invade. I do tend to wonder how the people who were excited about all the data we were getting on US weapons being tested against an actual competitor state, now being theoretically useless, since that state appears to at least be a neutral entity considering the statements and actions of our executive and Defense Department heads. Story 18. 23 years active duty, 8 years as a Fed. Always leaned left, but I am more left socially and right fiscally. I read Art of the Deal in the 90s and I've known DT to be FOS since then. I served under Bush, Clinton, Obama, and DT. While I disagreed with much of what we did, I never felt like we were hurtling toward inevitable destruction. Now I do. I've known racists in the military and we all just got done. This environment is one where people can be openly racist without repercussion, women can be harassed, and people are promoted not on their skills, but on their skin color. It will only get worse from here. Having removed the people who might stand up, I don't have high hopes that the good people left will be able to do much if when push comes to shove. Story 19. Unfortunately, a lot of people who don't support Trump have chosen to leave or intend to leave the military, including myself, which leaves the Trumpers and apolitical types. Story 20. Active him, in getting out soon, but he made the decision to leave easy, asking the obvious question, why on earth isn't the military actively discussing the fact that the commander-in-chief works for Russia? Seriously, it's disturbing that the sentiment isn't right at the top of the comments. Well, if this post is anything to go on, the USA is done. Story 21 Active military for the past 20 years and counting. I voted for Trump in 2016, and while I didn't approve of everything he did, I generally approved of his first term with the exception of his handling of COVID. I didn't vote for him in 2024, but between the two candidates, I preferred him to win. The government is too big and spends too much, and a person who has a bone to pick with government is generally the best suited to reduce the size of it. Having said all that, he is uncouth, sometimes obnoxious, and appears to be destroying our relations with foreign allies. Except for the one ally who in my 20 years at war in the region, has never provided assistance that I absolutely want relations destroyed with. Story 22 Active duty Coast Guard here. Most of us are pumped. We're excited to be doing counter-drug and counter-migrant missions. Too many people won't admit it because Reddit has become an echo chamber, but the silent majority is excited to have a president that seems to put America first. We had the opportunity to talk to Harris for Christmas and nobody wanted to. Everyone wants to meet Trump. Like I said though, it's a silent majority. People demonize the right especially on Reddit, so everyone mostly just keeps quiet. It's all doom and gloom from like 4 people I work with, but the rest love that we're getting rid of the DI bullshit and moving on to actual work. Story 23 I'm not active, but if I was right now, I'd be very concerned about the current commander-in-chief. I would be concerned about him manipulating the military to turn on American citizens, which is a very real possibility given how he talks. Story 24 As a vet that served under his last presidency, I would assume they all feel seen again, Biden gaff about their lives, and would have been extremely scary to serve under. Story 25 These AskReddits lately are super dumb. Imagine following a sports team who always sucks but always has fans, they don't lose, the refs messed up the game, the other team chested, yada yada yada, then they get to the championship but totally it up. In the press conference afterwards, they question the fans and the first question is, how does it feel to love a team that sucks? Do you just feel stupid? How do you expect them to respond? This isn't how you engage in conversation and it's what's broken about this platform. Outrage is for sale and cross-the-aisle discussion is not possible. Story 26 Don't ask active duty or reserves anything about this on social media. They can get in trouble for responding. Vets, sure, bring it, as long as they aren't currently federal, working to get the retirement they earned. Story 27 I was once ridiculed by mentioning the fact that I was a Cold War veteran that detests Trump. Trump is a traitor and Russian asset without a doubt. When we vote alongside Russia, Belarus, North Korea and Iran on a UN resolution to call out Russia as the aggressor, there is no further proof the US is compromised. I am disgusted by the traitors wrapping themselves in an American flag, blasting Lee Greenwood yet supporting a Putin-supporting fascist. MAGA are a collection of propaganda-consuming traitors. Story 28 I'm no longer in, but am ashamed watching what is happening. Trump is deporting Afghan nationals that came here legally with us when we left in 2022. He wants to deport Ukrainian asylum seekers. He's in the process of flagging potential DI forced inclusion photographs from military history which includes photos of black, trans and gay service members. He's with all our allies, stopped cybersecurity monitoring against Russia, blamed Ukraine for starting a war when they were invaded, the list goes on. The only thing I agree with is his stance on the Mexican border and targeting cartel members. Yes, finally, let's crack down and fight back against the drug lords. I'm all for that. I also do find it insane how open the borders have been, allowing illegal immigrants into the states. Everything else is a show, and even with the illegal immigration, I don't like the rhetoric Trump makes when speaking about it. He doesn't have to say Mexicans, but he's clearly alluding to comparing illegal immigrants to Mexicans in general. From my studying in college, going through history in the U.S., time and time again the U.S. allows certain demographics of immigrants en masse, and then later uses them as scapegoats to explain why the country has gone to. It happened with the Irish, the Chinese, the Japanese, and since early 2000s the new target has been Spanish-speaking people, mostly Mexicans. It goes like this: we need hard workers in America. The U.S. allows certain group of immigrants in, we love these guys, they're doing the work for us, we no longer need their services. This group is ruining America, get them out of here. Forgot to mention his budget cuts to the VA directly affects me. Recently my scheduled therapy appointment got pushed from 90 days to 6 months. I asked the doctor on the phone if this is related to the budget cuts and he said he couldn't speak on it, but we're doing what we can with the manpower we have left. Story 29 Not AD anymore, but I asked a few old friends over the weeks. The general consensus was it's scary how many people don't see a problem. Granted, my friends, who are now close to retirement and SNCOs, joined when the idea of service to America was still on people's minds. We all had grandparents who were in WW2. The lower enlisted tend to gravitate towards populism because they're young and impressionable, hence why they joined in the first place. It's the old-timers who are gung for Trump's agenda. That's the scary part, because those are the men and women who would be the roadblock. Trump is systematically removing general officers who would have refused orders, and given the blunt truth, he hated Jen Milley for a reason, he disliked SEC Def Mattis for a reason, he removed Jen Brown for a reason, he put a field-grade weekend warrior tactician with zero strategic experience and a lust for Trump in as SEC Def for a reason. ILLB captains, majors, LT calls, and NCOs who hold the line if needed. If there is any line left by then, it'll also be the reservists and guard members with brains in their heads. Story 30 Overall, Things are stable for now. The period from 2020 to 2022 was particularly challenging due to COVID-19, the early stages of the Ukraine conflict, and ongoing tensions in the South China Sea. However, at this point, operations feel much like they did during Trump's first term or even earlier, such as when the U.S. was engaged against ISIS under Obama. While global situations are always evolving, the reality on the ground is often less dire than how media or online discussions portray it. Challenges exist, as they always do, but it's not an unprecedented crisis. For now, it's business as usual. Story 31. I did a little over 10 years and have stayed in touch with a lot of my friends who are now lifers doing 20. All are senior NCOs at this point, which is weird to think about since we knew each other when we were lower enlisted and getting up to trouble. Anyway, it's a mixed bag and most of them are keeping their opinions mostly to themselves, which makes sense with how political the upper ranks are with regards to one's career advancement. One of them is a die-hard Trumper and very open about her opinions, which is to be expected since it's perfectly safe to do so now. She has stated very directly that any service member who doesn't support Trump or his policies should be expelled from the military. The rest, well, I'll just say that knowing what I know about them, you can kind of read between the lines and figure out where they're at. There's a lot of talking in code context cues going on, sort of a IYKYK kind of deal. With all that said, I've seen a lot of questions along these lines in various places and get the sense that spectators are fishing for some statement about how dissent is rife through the ranks or people are willing prepared to defy a direct lawful order from the commander-in-chief, to which I say don't hold your breath. I don't have the bandwidth to explain all the ways in which this perspective is off except to point out that during the previous administration we were directly facilitating a genocide in Gaza, the most morally repugnant thing we could do short of conducting it ourselves, and only one single service member that I know of anyway, Aaron Bushnell, did anything materially relevant about it. I'm sure in fact I know plenty of people did not support Biden helping Bibi murder children en masse, but at the end of the day they kept their head down and stayed within the guidelines of duty-approved social media conduct so as to not jeopardize their careers. You need to sit with that, really think about it and what that means. We're not heroes, we're simply people trying to make a life for ourselves with all the perks of service housing, college, healthcare, escaping poverty, etc. The rest is just window dressing we tell ourselves to feel important. Nobody is coming to save you, you're going to have to do that yourself. Story 32. My husband is in the reserves and has been contemplating going active duty for the past couple of years. We are both concerned that we are headed toward war, but I'm more concerned that I'm uncertain what side we'd be on. Story 33. Yo, shipmates, be very careful about responding to this as a service member. That's a form of representation we are not permitted to conduct. If you have PI on your profile, I recommend deletion. Stay safe out there. Story 34. As an American, how do the rest of you feel knowing that there are bloodthirsty people slowly getting the okay to harass and maybe, just maybe, be able to use force against the rest? Ask yourself if you're ready for that and what that means for your loved ones. Not fear-mongering, but I've been around for a while and have met people that don't give about their lives. How can I ask them to care about mine's? Just food for thought. Story 35. Served 6 years. I'm honestly having a lot of guilt on the fact that I served a country who would turn their back on a country like Ukraine that is being bullied by multiple world superpowers to give up their society for a dictator. The things I've seen happen this past 4 to 6 weeks have really changed my mindset on America. Story 36. I enjoyed his first term as a service member. Didn't always agree with how he went about certain things, but he didn't believe in the status quo, and it was refreshing to see a president trying to bring end to wars, not start a war, and usher in peace deals. We are just starting this term, so I'm optimistic and hopeful as opposed to the last administration. Night and day difference, and we have one of a SecDef. Story 37. My sister and her husband are Air Force, both approaching 12-year college degrees. My sister has had multiple Air Force News Network level articles about her humanitarian accolades. She is very smart and very kind. She was home last week chanting Joe Rogan is truth, mega is the mind virus. We are cooked. Story 38. Mods. Can we ban political questions in this sub? Reddit is so heavily liberal that we just get the same responses over and over without any real discussion or variety, for an answer that will probably get buried. My brother is active Army Reserves and has been in the military for over 30 years. He earned a Bronze Star while fighting in the Middle East. He currently works for FEMA and has already witnessed a handful of his colleagues lose their job while wondering if they will come for his job next. All of this, and he still supports Trump and believes that he is doing the right thing. The majority of his military peers feel the same way. The military is full of dim people who took the job because they didn't have any better options. And the barracks are filled with testosterone, false egos, and Second Amendment supporters. This is the perfect breeding ground for Trump supporters, which most of them are. But you're not going to find answers from actual conservatives in this thread because this site is too liberal for them to stray outside of a conservative, and the only thing that gets upvoted is the answer that everyone here wants to hear, aka an echo chamber. Story 39. I was on base yesterday. There's a new sense of optimism, at least in this area. Colin Powell once said optimism is a force multiplier, and he's right. The recruitment numbers are also very reassuring, but that could change at any time. Just stating what we are seeing so far up to this point. Story 40. I am in a group with former Navy from E5 and to E9. Most of them decided to remove logic from their lives once they became conservatives. They share lots of falsehoods in the group, and borderline racist in the group. It's crazy and sad. Some of them are siding with Russia because of Trump madness. Story 41 Former reserve here, and I am just grateful I am not serving under him. I would have a very difficult time not rebelling against his unconstitutional orders. Story 42 The rancid piece of human detritus negotiated the surrender with the Taliban, let 5,000 of them out of prison and set the troop levels and timeline for the withdrawal. Also he could make Biden look bad while getting 13 of my brothers and sisters murdered. Before this he had the audacity to refer to our war dead as suckers and losers, because he's too much of a narcissist to comprehend what was in it for them. Despite all of this our active duty, and according to exit polls, 60 of veterans voted for that piece of. Imagine being such a brainwashed, hateful racist that you'd rather vote for an who doesn't care about your service and sacrifice because you hate brown people and the LGBTQ community so much. Story 43 Active Duty Military. I swore an oath to the Constitution, not to any man-woman. I have my personal disagreements many with the administration, but as many previous posts have pointed out, I don't choose the boss other than my one vote. I just do what Hesha says as long as it's constitutional. How it has affected me and my colleagues personally. I'm in a unique position where my entire command is 6 active duty service members and 3 civilians. I can tell you that the insane amount of changes i.e. delete change anything regarding DEI, complete freeze on all our spending can't mail anything, buy basic supplies, or such, complete freeze on all travel leading to a significant loss of necessary training, just to name a few has very directly and extremely negatively impacted my ability to do my job. I would estimate since the administration change on January 20th, I have personally spent an entire work week, about 40 man-hours, implementing changes to policies practices, and that's just me alone. There is such turmoil and confusion about what exactly is meant by a lot of the orders coming down from Podesective 100. Undoubtedly this is distracting us from our warfighting capabilities, but again as long as it's not unconstitutional I do as I'm told to the best of my abilities, extremely confident that all but one of the 9 of us have similar feelings on this matter. Edit spelling grammar, thanks military education. Story 44 Cannot wait to put my retirement letter in next year. I was on the fence about doing over 20, but now I would have to be completely bats hit to stay in, especially in the branch I'm in. I voted Kamala. Most of my coworkers like Trump, not surprised honestly, and now everyone is backpedaling and I love seeing the confusion and negativity that has come in the past month. Ready to take my retirement pay, move to another country and contribute to their economy. Sucks that I will still get taxed by the US with my pension and disability, though good riddance. Story 45 I'm recently retired, so I can speak freely. What a disaster. The uncertainty, last-minute changes, and loss of civilian personnel is demoralizing. Trips and reservations planned months in advance are being cancelled to save money, where the reservations are too late to be cancelled cost-free. Remote work for reservists is no longer possible, at great expense. For example, when working in person I used to go to CO from my state, flying, renting a car and staying in a hotel. Tons of reserve members are stationed far from their base of assignment and now have to go the nearest base to sit in an office. I'm a lawyer, so my job can be done effectively remotely. Some of the time military members are being asked to submit 5 bullets of what they did last week, or be fired, and then told not to do it and then to do it, but be sure not to mention your classified work. Respected military leaders are being removed. The head JAGs who ensured compliance with the law of armed conflict, removed. At the academies, groups like Women in Engineering no longer allowed to advertise, use government facilities or attend meetings on duty, because that's DEI. Web pages on minority achievements in the military, removed. Allies confused and upset, enemies emboldened. Story 46 Active Duty Marine. It is highly frowned upon to speak on politics in the workplace in the military. However, my leadership 05 upkeep reassuring us that they will not tolerate any type of discrimination, DI conversations, racism, homophobia, etc. The vibe of the conversations are always yeah this dude is nuts, and we're not tolerating any of the bullshit he's saying without actually saying it. Story 47 Former. During my time in service, if I or anyone else had done what Trump did on 16/21 and in the days leading up to it, I or they would have had very long sentences at FT, Leavenworth and never allowed to serve again. Instead the majority of Republican senators voted to let Trump off the hook, justified by dubious and self-serving rationales. I need those votes to get re-elected, and here we are today, with an absolute villain and traitor to our values and country abandoning our principles and planning to make the military complicit in his villainy. I hope those currently serving have the moral rectitude and allegiance to the Constitution to refuse Allegro orders, and in case of doubt resign their commissions. For enlisted, you can do what enlisted have done from time immemorial, slow walk idiocy from above. Story 48 Not military, but I can see here how cooked Reddit is. I have 4 active military friends and every one of them is conservative. The only people this website is fooling are people that don't go outside. Story 49 My battles who I was close with support Trump, and they're all 13 series or artillery, so there's a reason they don't need good ASFOB scores. Anyway, I find that with those who aren't, especially with my leadership, they are mostly Democratic and liberal. We are in a blue city and we haven't even changed our CIC photo from Biden's last portrait. I feel mostly secure relative to other units, because I know they will ensure we uphold the Constitution, and not just blindly follow orders, especially not illegal ones. I do have an equal amount or more battles that cannot stand Trump though. Edit said platoons instead of units. Story 50. My grandfather severed 20 years. My father served 43 years. I served 6 years. Every war we have served, I have never been more ashamed of this country. Story 51. I love Reddit. Where the left creates a hive mind and believe this world is reality. How did military vote in 2024 presidential election? Story 52. I'm a Canadian, and I have a great deal of respect for you US soldiers. My cousin served with you boys in Afghanistan. My grandfather's in WW2. Serve your constitution, not the leader. Respect to you all for your service. Story 53. In the National Guard right now. I'm literally the only person in my unit who hates him and everyone else is in the cult. It's extremely concerning how much they eat up his bullshit. Story 54. 8 years. Total both active, reserves, and IRR. Trump is a danger to our military. Every soldier sailor airman might have to decide soon if a wacky order should be followed, something like mow down that crowd of your countrymen women. Story 55. Retired so I can freely speak my mind. This guy is a draft dodger who is selling our allies down the river. I question his loyalty to the United States. Story 56. TLDR. Trump being elected president, no matter what he does publicly, will not affect the US military readiness to oppose Russia, follow them with intelligence, and use our resources to keep the most vigilant eye on them. China is a bigger active threat to international security and the United States. Long part am not active duty anymore, but I've read a lot of these comments and there's just one worrying theme. Everybody seems to act like, and I'm including people who are talking directly about either being active duty now or previously and their experiences, but these people seem to act like now that Trump is president again, suddenly the United States is just going to stop considering them a threat or working against them actively. None of that will change. He publicly is more willing to negotiate work with Russia, but that has nothing to do with our military constantly keeping an eye on them, still patrolling the Pacific Ocean, still doing all the other intelligence work that I can't even talk about. The fact is Russia is not a serious threat to America. They are not crazy enough to use their nuclear weapons because everybody knows that that will just be the end of mankind as we know it for the most part, or at least our two countries. We're still going to continue to do all the things to keep an eye on them and manage their threats militarily, intelligence-wise, and with other assets. The fact is that China is the bigger threat to international security. China simply does things quietly, more discreetly, and Russia is the one waving a big stick that's on fire, and while that's their threat, China is walking around with a lightsaber. Trying to plans to take back Taiwan when they get the opportunity, and this will lead to either letting them have it and showing the world that we're willing to keep giving countries like Russia and China territory that doesn't rightfully belong to them or at least wants to remain independent. The US military has been preparing for a war with China and reformatting for the better part of a decade. I guess in summary, all this politics, all this talking, all this visual on the outside is not even 5 of the real story behind the scenes, and everybody gets so hung up on it. When I was in the military, I'm not going to give my exact job position or anything I did, nor could it be found on Reddit, but my job was directly involved with countering Russian ambitions. They've always been the enemy and will be. But they are not the biggest threat on the globe, and although I don't like our president working with them so hand in hand, it's not going to change the fact that we're still ready to fight them if something bigger happens. Not to mention the fact that Russia couldn't even manage the invasion of Ukraine with a little bit of Western support to Ukraine. Don't have a capability to offensively do much more. Edit. I realize that most of the time giving thoughts on Reddit that counter the popular or emotional opinion are hated, but I frankly don't care. If I reach even 5 people that could understand my words and have it put them a little bit more at ease, I will be happy. 'Cause really at the end of the day, that's the only reason I'm saying this. Think about the fact that at any given moment right now a ton of allied countries such as the US and Canada, the UK and the United States, France and England, etc., everybody has plans for going to war with each other, invading each other, and seeing what would happen worst case scenario. So why would we not be prepared for somebody who actively has been an enemy for decades? Of course we're prepared, not to mention the fact that the United States military is above and beyond ridiculously far ahead of every other military on Earth.